And you got quite the, I mean, cold shoulder would be an understatement, but punishment, um, being basically separated, your family, basically, kind of uh, separating themselves from you. Can you kind of talk about what happened in real time as you decided this and all the consequences you dealt with?
Yeah, I mean, I was basically rejected by people that, there's kind of famous stories about the bonds you create in kind of a war environment, and to have everybody turn their back on you. And I basically spent 6 months, painting curbs, waiting, baking cakes, washing dishes, absorbing the ridicule of the chain of command. There's two people that kind of stood by me during that time. It was Pat Tillman and Kevin Tillman. They kind of respected my decision. They too, I think, felt let down by what they were being asked to do overseas. And so they stood by me, and they weren't afraid to sit there and have lunch with me when everybody else turned their back on me.
Mhm.
So I was expecting to go to the jail or the big army, to be a bullet stopper, as it was referred to in the regiment. And what happened was, I got called down to formation. I was thinking this was going to be the day after 6 months of kind of punishment detail. I was going to jail, but I was told that Pat was killed in an enemy ambush in Afghanistan the night prior, which was pretty overwhelming. And so I was sent right back up to my room. The next day was sent back down, and was told to pack my bags, and that I was going to be sent out of the military. No jail, no big army, no even lecture, really. They just wanted me out, because they were covering up the death of Pat, which was an act of friendly fire. And so, yeah, that's how I ended up leaving the military.
Mhm.
So
And can you talk about, this is not just a story of becoming, a war resistor, which, by the way, I mean, I know my audience does, but I have a lot of admiration for what you did. You kind of found socialism also over the years because, I think Bernie Sanders, for example, I don't know if he did a great job of this, but was in his second campaign was really trying to connect that these wars and foreign policy, it's all connected to what we don't have domestically. And they're not some separate thing, but our lack of healthcare, crumbling education, poverty is in large part a result of everything we're doing abroad. So, what was your path to basically this political awakening to move more towards socialism?
sure. Well, I just started reading after I think I read Kinzer's Overthrow. Read some Howard Zinn. I met people who worked at Haymarket Books. Here in Chicago, started reading some of that stuff. And after I left the military, I didn't necessarily have these words at the time, but I wanted nothing to do with exploiting or oppressing anybody ever again. And I think when you break down socialism, I think it's an attempt to fight exploitation and oppression wherever it rears its head. I think, and so that's what I wanted to do. And you have a lot of red baiting and propaganda of what socialism is. I thought it was Stalinism my whole life, or even Maoism, or But to me, it was just a really simple concept. Anytime I saw someone stealing from somebody, or oppressing somebody, or killing somebody, for all the wrong reasons. I don't, if there's ever a good reason for any of that stuff, but I wanted to do my part in fighting it, and I think that's how I came to socialism. And there's quite a few people out there. There's also quite a few veterans who feel the same way and push back against U.S. imperialism, and also want to fight exploitation and oppression everywhere it rears its head. And so I was able to link up with these people at Veterans for Peace and Iraq Veterans Against the War, About Face now, and now I work for Haymarket Books and get to work with all these amazing authors and kind of help give people a vocabulary to understand, what they're going through in terms of
Mhm.
exploitation and oppression.
We went to Afghanistan almost 20 years ago. with clear goals. Get those who attacked us on September 11th, 2001, and make sure al-Qaeda could not use Afghanistan as a base from which to attack us again. We did that. We severely degraded al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. We never gave up the hunt for Osama bin Laden, and we got him. That was a decade ago. Our mission in Afghanistan was never supposed to have been nation building. We've developed counterterrorism over-the-horizon capability that will allow us to keep our eyes firmly fixed on the direct threats to the United States and the region, and act quickly and decisively if needed. When I came into office, I inherited a deal that President Trump negotiated with the Taliban. Under his agreement, U.S. forces would be out of Afghanistan by May 1, 2021, just a little over 3 months after I took office. There would have been no ceasefire after May 1. There was no agreement protecting our forces after May 1. There was no status quo of stability without American casualties after May 1. There was only the cold reality of either following through on the agreement to withdraw our forces or escalating the conflict and sending thousands more American troops back into combat in Afghanistan, lurching into the third decade of conflict. I stand squarely behind my decision. After 20 years, I've learned the hard way that there was never a good time to withdraw U.S. forces. That's why we're still there. If anything, the developments of the past week reinforced that ending U.S. military involvement in Afghanistan now was the right decision. American troops cannot and should not be fighting in a war and dying in a war that Afghan forces are not willing to fight for themselves. We spent over $1 trillion. We trained and equipped an Afghan military force with some 300,000 strong, incredibly well equipped. We gave them every chance to determine their own future. What we could not provide them was the will to fight for that future. It is wrong to order American troops to step up when Afghanistan's own armed forces would not. The political leaders of Afghanistan were unable to come together for the good of their people, unable to negotiate for the future of their country when the chips were down. They would never have done so while U.S. troops remained in Afghanistan, bearing the brunt of the fighting for them. This is not in our national security interest. It is not what the American people want. It is not what our troops, who have sacrificed so much over the past 2 decades, deserve. I made a commitment to the American people when I ran for president that I would bring America's military involvement in Afghanistan to an end. While it's been hard and messy, and yes, far from perfect, I've honored that commitment. More importantly, I made a commitment to the brave men and women who serve this nation that I wasn't going to ask them to continue to risk their lives in a military action that should have ended long ago.
So what were your initial reactions to what he said, which was frankly kind of a mix of throwing previous presidents under the bus, including Obama? He didn't mention him by name, but did mention he was against the surge under Obama, and basically saying, doesn't matter if we got out now, 5 years ago, 10 years from now, what you're seeing now would have happened regardless.
Yeah, I mean, it's 2021 and he's saying these things. I'm sure people would have made space for him and the anti-war marches in the 2003, 2002, 2001. There was any number of events that happened where people were pushing back and challenging U.S. imperialism for the last 20 years. The words feel a little bit empty. I also feel like he was put in this situation, so it's hard to know how authentic those comments were. After Trump withdrew the vast majority of the troops, I do think there was going to be a potential for some more bloodshed on the part of the U.S. In escalating conflict over the next couple of months, based on the decisions that the Trump administration kind of made. And I think they kind of boxed, Biden in a lot of ways. But I don't think there was nearly enough focus on the responsibility that the United States bears for the amount of chaos and horror that is happening in Afghanistan right now. There wasn't nearly enough talk about the refugee crisis that is going to ensue over the next couple of months and years as a result.
During a raging pandemic, by the way.
Exactly. So, I was, obviously some of the things that he said were true, but the person saying it wasn't very inspiring. I think the U.S. needs to do way more soul search. Like, I guess you need a soul to do soul searching, but I think there has to be a real accounting of the amount of money that has been wasted, and the lives lost, the innocents' lives lost, and then the fallout. And that certainly wasn't covered the way it should have been in that speech.
And also,
and a lot of blame for, this is the Afghans' fault. This is the Afghan people for running, with totally taking the stuff out of context and, identifying, the reality of what Afghan people were faced with in terms of the Taliban's rise over the last 10 years.
I want to get from you. I credited him, but I also, I kind of have a brain. I don't know. Every time they say we're leaving these places, all of a sudden, years later, you find out, oh no, there's still like 4,000 or 5,000 troops there for whatever bullshit they come up with, advising, special advisors, this and that. I think we've left Iraq like 3 times now, when, the media covered as if I remember Rachel Maddow covering the troops leaving Iraq well over a decade ago, but then recently, Trump removed, I think, a couple thousand from there. So, we can't predict the future, but is it, do we really think he's removing all troops and all U.S. investments from Afghanistan?
Well, they're sending 6,000 troops in there right now to, I guess, facilitate the withdrawal. So they took them out, and now they're sending them back. And yeah, who knows what has? I have zero faith. We have close to 800 military bases around the world. So the U.S. isn't leaving anything. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see, how things work out in the next couple of months. But I don't have a ton of faith in, the United States doing the right thing in any capacity.